Insurance Company Limited, where you get more coverage for less.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
It's a beautiful Saturday morning here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and you're listening to 1FM 98.9. I'm your host for today, Devon Cornelius. Good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for tuning into 1FM 98.9. Those of you joining via radio, via the website, and of course via our social media pages. This is a panel discussion featuring representatives from political parties in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I'm your moderator, Devon Cornelius. These are our panelists. The Honorable John L. Powell. He's the Minister of Education in St. Kitts and Nevis, and he is the chairman of the People's Action Movement, PAM, and the parliamentary representative for constituency number 2, elected in the June 2020 general elections. Mr. Powell is a graduate of the Norman Manley Law School and the University of the West Indies. The other panelist is Senator the Honorable Dr. Joyelle Clarke of the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party. Dr. Clarke has been part of the teaching fraternity since her graduate days at UWI. She is a volunteer member of the UNESCO Man and Biosphere Committee, focusing on the education component. Dr. Joyelle Clarke is a youth activist encouraging environmental justice through activism and volunteerism. She has been involved in livelihoods research for over 10 years, working on areas of post-sugar economic transition, agricultural livelihoods, cooperatives, and climate change. She is an advocate of women's and youth empowerment and a firm believer in empowering through service. She has been an educator for the past 5 years at a secondary school level, working closely with the Keon High School Environment Program. She continues her research and thesis supervision activities in collaboration with CFBC and other private students pursuing advanced degrees. Clarke has been able to fuse her current job as a geography teacher and a research interest in environment and youth empowerment. JD S.K. Keynes is a communications specialist, part-time educator, and community activist who resides on the island of Nevis. She is popularly known for her involvement in Nevis's Culturama Festival at varying levels. She is also revered for her significant contribution to media in St. Kitts and Nevis as a journalist, editor, reporter, and show host. As an advocate for women empowerment and women in leadership, JD has volunteered her time and services to the annual International Women's Day activities of the Ministry of Gender Affairs on Nevis. She holds degrees in criminal justice and communications from the University of the Virgin Islands and was that institution's class speaker in 2010. She has received numerous academic and leadership awards. JD is humbled to be the Nevis Reformation Party's candidate for the St. Paul's constituency. She wants to raise the profile of politics in Nevis and fulfill a platform that encompasses youth, education and training, equal opportunities, gender balance, culture, and community and social development. The Honorable Troy Liburd, he is He has been a senator in the Nevis Island Assembly since 2013. He currently serves as the island's Junior Minister of Education, Information Technology, and Library Services. Mr. Liebert is the distinguished chairman of the Concerned Citizens Movement, CCM. Mr. Craig Tuckett. Mr. Craig Tuckett is the Director of Communications for the People's Labour Party, PLP, and an educator, academic, entrepreneur, and graduate from the University of the West Indies, and he is presently the University of the West Indies Global Alumni Representative. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, these are our distinguished panelists. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Inside the News on 8.9. As said earlier, I am your moderator, Devon Cornelius. Let me use this opportunity to thank all of you for accepting our invitation, and I look forward to a very fruitful discussion on this very important topic. Is access to education equal? And of course, with the subtopic, advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. I will now allow the panelists to give their opening remarks, and we will begin shortly. I will begin with Mr. Craig Tuckett of the People's Labour Party. Mr. Tuckett, welcome.
Thank you very much, Devon, and to all of your listeners, of course, to the management and staff of WinFM, and of course, to my learned colleagues who are participating in this panel discussion. My name is Craig Tuckett, as was mentioned earlier, and we, at the end, hopefully, at the end of this panel discussion, my premise would be that, yes, at this point in time in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, access to education is equal, but we need to move towards equity. And when I say equity, it means that based on your socioeconomic background, the necessary resources to the administration of the government, and I will say at this time to the TM Unity administration, those resources will be facilitated so that persons who may need more resources than others can access the necessary tertiary, right up to tertiary education for the benefit of nation building. And so with those few words, I will now conclude and wait to hear from my other colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Tuckett. We'll continue with the Honorable Troy Liebert of the CCM. We're not hearing. Okay, go ahead now.
Good morning, everybody. Certainly a pleasure to be a part of this distinguished panel. I want to thank WinFM for the invitation, for affording me the opportunity to come and speak on the very pertinent topic of education. And Mr. Tuckett, who would have spoken before me, I think he would have hit the nail squarely on the head in speaking about where we are with education. What we are looking for with education, certainly from the perspective of the Nevis Island administration, is equity. I believe that there is a great deal of equity within our current system, but we are not perfect. And education by its very nature is something that is not static. Education by its very nature is something that continues to evolve and continues to change. The education system that we have now, while the basics probably remain the same or they are similar to what pertained 30 years ago, a lot of things have changed, a lot of the goals have changed, a lot of the thresholds have changed, and therefore the type of education that we try to bring to the young people, that has to also change and adjust to fit the time. So we would want to continue to evolve our system to make education more equitable, so that students, regardless of their varying backgrounds and regardless to their varying abilities, would be able to access education in a way that would be most beneficial to them. So I would end my little opening there and would wait for someone else to come in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liebert. We're going to continue with the Senator Dr. Joel Clark of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Devon, for the invitation and also for preparing a panel. I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo. Right. So,
sorry, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be a part of this panel, especially since it speaks to education. I come from a long line of educators, and I myself, having been working in the Ministry of Education for the past 5 to 6 years, I've seen changes, and I recognize too that although St. Kitts and Nevis remains ahead of the curve in terms of our changes in education, changes in things that we've done since the 60s that some countries like St. Lucia only last year have made changes to ensure that access to education is equal. You can be ahead of the curve and you can still recognize that there are things that you need to do to improve the delivery of education. And to properly assess the equity in access to education, one has to look at issues such as gender, your skill base, your geographic location, spatial dimensions, even your religion and your political association to determine if access to education is in fact equal and if we can actually achieve equity in access to education. So I look forward to the discussion this morning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. We're going to now have J.D. Keynes of the Nevis Reformation Party.
Good morning. Okay, I'm hearing a feedback.
Okay, you can go ahead.
All
yes.
right. So good morning to everyone. Everyone listening under the sound of my voice, from those of you listening via the radio, to those of you who are tuned via the World Wide Web. I extend extra special Saturday morning's greetings, though, to everyone here physically on the island of Nevis, particularly those members of my family and my close friends, of course, my daughter and all of my godchildren. I can't be featured on radio or television and not give them a shout out, as we would say locally. So good morning to everyone. I also want to say good morning to everyone who may be bereaved at this time. I'm hoping that you will find comfort in fond memories. Good morning to the esteemed panel and to you, Devon, and your team at WinFM. I want to thank you so much for putting together this discussion. I like the panel and I like the topic as well. And so I look forward to a very fruitful discussion. Of course, we'll have an opportunity to expound or give our thoughts on the topic that is before us. And so I'll save my specific comments until then. But on that note, I'll just say good morning again to everyone and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Keynes. We're now going to have the Honorable Donald Powell of the People's Action Movement.
Hi, good morning to all. Devon, good morning to you, the rest of the panel. It is indeed an honor to be able to be a part of such a panel of heavy hitters, young heavy hitters here in St. Kitts and Nevis, not just in the political sphere, but even further afield. It's education, and it's a privilege for me to be able to join in as the current Minister of Education, Federal Minister of Education. I think from what I've heard, we all seem to be generally on the same page. I believe that there's a great deal of equality in access to education here in St. Kitts and Nevis, but the question is the equity. And I think that there's so many, it is very subjective, and there's so many things that affect the equity of the access to education here. Socioeconomic, Dr. Clark would have named a number of other things. And so that is where we need to start to put our focus. Education, like so many other things in life, is continuously moving. It's not a static concept. And so it is a matter of us as a nation coming together and ensuring that we are all part of the process as stakeholders in terms of being able to help each child have that equitable access that is required for them to make the most of themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Powell. Again, let me say good morning to all of you. And again, thank you guys so much for accepting this invitation. We're now going to begin this panel discussion, and we are going to start with Mr. Craig Tuckett of the People's Labour Party. He is the Director of Communications for the PLP. Now, let me just remind those of you who just tuned in that the topic is access to education equal? And the subtopic is advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. Mr. Tuckett, you may begin.
Okay, thank you very much again. I have, based on the agreed time for my presentation, 5 minutes. So I will endeavor to first address the major topic, which is before us. Of course, we all agree, I think, based on the opening statements from my colleagues, that in St. Kitts and Nevis, in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, we do have equal access to education. But we would like to move to the next step, which is equity. So what is education? Education is a process of facilitating learning through the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, morals even, spiritual or otherwise, beliefs and habits. It is an educational method. It is through the educational method that includes teaching, training, storytelling, discussions like these, and direct research, where this process is achieved. Now, every nation has a responsibility to develop its primary resource, which is our people. We, the People Labour Party, our motto is putting people first. And as a part of our major constitution, our constitutional goals, our aims and objectives is we must, and we pledge, to attain the highest standard of health and education, and the training or to achieve a highly trained population. And that is Article 2 within our Constitution. And within that same article, in Section 10, we say we want equality of opportunity for all. So it shows that within our political party, we have that as our foremost aim, or one of our foremost aims, education being main driving force to ensure that our people are prepared to help in nation building. So education frequently takes place under the guidance of educators, as I also come from a long line of educators. My mother, Dr. Sharon Isdale, and also others within my education process. Many teachers would have helped me, my father, and also my brothers and sisters, my community. They would have helped in training me and educating me in terms of who I am today. But it's important for the administration or the government to play its role to ensure that we all, as a people, have the opportunity. And so this needs a formal and, in some cases, informal setting. So that's why we have schools. So you have the situation where through the one of the great reformers of our education system in St. Kitts and Nevis, we would have had Sir, well, I would call him Sir, but Mr. Bryant, who would have helped to formulate the education system that we now have. And then after that, under the People's Action Movement, you saw the building of many more plants, the brick and mortar schools in various communities. And so you saw the development of education in our society, which also helped in the advancement of our nation as we now develop, as we are no longer classified, it is said, as a developing country. But what is universal access? Universal access to education is the ability for all people to have equal opportunity. And this is seen where presently we have scholarships for our nation or citizens to study wherever they desire in the world, whether it be Europe, whether in Asia, whether even be in the United States. And also, if you don't get scholarships, you have access to loan facilities. And even within the University of West Indies, our government pays for 80% of the economic costs. And then, of course, you as a student who endeavors to attain higher learning, you just pay 20%. So these are the resources that are made available. But again, like I said, we are talking about equality, not yet equity. Universal education is indeed our aim, because it is now, you could say, indirectly, a fundamental human right. I would like to say that as a country, we need to reassess our constitution. We need to consider constitutional reform. I would like to identify, for instance, one such progressive constitution, which is that of Guyana. It has in its listing of principles and basis for political, economic, and social system, what would you say, the human rights. It has in Article 27, the right to education. It is expressed. And so it is so expressed that you who are a citizen of Guyana have the right to be educated right up to the tertiary level for free. We also see this in Barbados. So now, of course, every country has various challenges in terms of the economy. We have just over 60,000 people, and out of that 60,000 people, which includes the firstborn up to the retiree, maybe just 20,000 or 25,000, maybe even 30,000 of that is our working force. So it shows that with a GDP of close to, we now see in the budgets every year, 800 million EC dollars, we have a very productive working force. But they can become even more productive if they have other access to development in their educational development. Because too much is spent upon the learning of skills that are to meet the necessary needs of any government or the development of that nation. But we need to now think out of the box and make available to our human resource, our people, opportunities to develop in other areas and emerging sectors such as ICT and of course trading online, which is Forex trading, Bitcoin trading. This will lead to a level of financial independence that we definitely will have to encourage, especially in these times of COVID, which we will discuss in the other segment. So we also see that clearly within the United Nations Millennium Goals, we see that education, or should I say not just education, or the right to education, or the human right to education is key. It's actually number 4 goal on the agenda for 2030. So what has this administration done? It has done so much where, for instance, on all educational supplies, there is no VAT. So it shows that they are trying in itself to develop that process of getting free and available resources to our human resource, our people, so that they can have access, equal access to education. We have free preschool education. So we see that is also a very important part of the pre-cognitive development of our people. We have education guaranteed for our persons who are eligible to University of the West Indies and other universities, as I've mentioned before. We also see that through ICT development and through the policy that the government has now put forward to work with private sector to advance broadband internet. And I would like to encourage our people who are listening, no more should we consider the internet just as for entertainment, but we need to use it for education. And this is a discussion I think that needs to be looked at and maybe even taught at our schools. How do we utilize this very immense tool that now affords us the opportunity to have the whole world as our oyster, as our market? And so I know I have passed my 5 minutes, but with opportunity in the discussion or in the answering of any questions, I will be able to expand more. Thank you very much. I now hand it over to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tuckett. We're going to continue this discussion as we're a little bit behind time, and we're going to continue with the Honorable Troy Liburd of the Concerned Citizens Movement. As I said before, he is the party's chairman. Mr. Liburd, you may begin.
Thank you once again, Devon. And of course, we're speaking on the topic, is access to education equal? And I want to go right ahead and say that in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have done a better job than most other places in making access to education equal. But what we are really looking at in terms of education, and me being the minister with responsibility for education in the Nevis Island administration, at the outset, I want to say that in St. Kitts and Nevis, what we try to do, we have the NIA Ministry of Education and the Federal Ministry of Education, and we try to work in unison as much as possible. So a lot of the things that I am going to say, I have no doubt that the federal minister, when he speaks, that he will say a lot of the same things, because both ministries, we work so closely together that we try to keep, basically most of the things that are happening over on St. Kitts as in sync as possible to the things that are happening in Nevis. So it's pretty much the same system across the entire federation. Of course, there would be a few subtle differences, but nothing really, to talk about. So the level of education that we try to bring to our young people and even to the adults is pretty much the same across the federation. But I want to talk a bit about equity, because you can sit down in the class and teach 20 students in the same class, all of the same lessons, and not all of them are going to come out and get, the same marks on the exam. So what we are trying to get towards is equity. And one of the new buzzwords that we have going around is differentiated instructions, where our teachers are now being taught how to teach students in the class and how to teach for the different levels of students that you would encounter in a class, so as to tailor the education experience for each student based on his or her own skills, based on the speed with which that particular student learns. So we are trying to tailor make the system even more to try to assist our students. So the faster students who learn at a very quick rate, they would be taught in a way so that they can advance at their pace. And then the students who don't learn as quickly, the instruction will come to them in a way so that it is at their level. UNESCO defines equity in education as the extent to which access and opportunities for children and adults are just and fair. So we want to make our system here in the Federation as just as possible and as fair as possible, so that students would have, the opportunities to make themselves into the best that they could possibly be. Over the years, we have had many programs. We are currently on the back end of the education sector plan, which is a sector plan covering both St. Kitts and Nevis. And in preparing that sector plan, what they did was to identify the various gaps and the various disparities that were in the system. And then they came up with a plan and with measures that would make the education system more equitable across the board. And as I said, we are on the back end of that because we are now in 2021. That sector plan was from 2017 up until 2021. If I could start from, early childhood, because education here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, it goes from the daycares all the way up to tertiary education or university education. Here in the Federation, we, in the Ministry of Education, we want to have a hand in, the development of our children from the very earliest stages up to adulthood. So in the early childhood sector, specifically in the Nevis Island Administration, and I'm sure it's the same thing federally, we do training for our public preschools and daycares. We provide training for the staff and also for our private preschools and daycare. We have a system where the ministry has persons who would go out and assess the various schools, assess the various teachers and so on. We also have a program that's called the Reaching the Unreached, and this is mostly tailored for the home-based nurseries. So support is also provided for our home-based nurseries and so on. Something that I'm particularly proud of in terms of bringing equity to our system. Here on Nevis, the government provides a subvention of $10 per enrolled child at every preschool. And the $10 might sound like something small, but when I met the system, there was a system of providing subvention, but there was no equity to it. Some schools were given quite a large amount in their subventions, and then there were other schools who had more students who were getting less by way of subvention. So what we did was we decided to, across the board, provide a equal sum for each student enrolled in each school. So every school in Nevis, every preschool on Nevis gets a subvention from the government. In our primary schools, our access to education in the primary schools here in the Federation is across the board. All students of primary age, they're expected to be in school. It's mandatory for all students to be in school, of course. And I think we have done a very good job in the Federation of keeping our students in school. The Department of Education provides a lot of support to our teachers. We provide training for our teachers. We provide on-the-job coaching for our teachers to ensure that they are teaching the various subject areas in the correct ways. Students who we notice have challenges, those students, of course, are identified, and additional assistance is given to those students. We have a very lovely program called the Early Learners Program, and this one is targeted at our students when they just come into the primary schools. This is from kindergarten to grade 3, when our students are very young and in that formative time. And we want to ensure that they get really, really good habits. So the Early Learners Program is targeted at our younger students.
Right, Mr. Lambert, you just have 30 more seconds as we're behind time. Yes.
The thing about education is that there's so much that we can say about education in the Federation. There are so many different things happening in education. It's not a small field at all, because I'm down to 30 seconds and I did not even get to touch any of the things that we do for our high schoolers, any of the things that we do in terms of universities, assisting a lot of our young people with scholarships and so on. As Mr. Tuckett said earlier, the government provides economic costs for our students attending university at the University of the Western East. So there's a lot to be happy about in terms of education here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Is the system perfect? I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it is a very, very good system. It is a very equal system, and our system provides a lot of equity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liebert. Remember, we're going to explore the subtopic, which is advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. So you can use that opportunity to discuss some of the opportunities offered to students at the secondary and tertiary level. We're going to take a short break right now to say thank you to our sponsors for this program. And when we come back, we're going to continue, and we're going to have Senator Dr. Joel Clark of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party. Let us take this short break, and we will be back shortly.
TDC Automotive is paying. TDC Automotive is paying for you. Deposit? We're paying. 3-month installments? We're paying. Pay nothing for 3 months because we are paying. Take a moment, catch your breath, and roll out with ease. Save over $20,000 off your new Toyota Hiace because TDC Automotive is paying. Get your Toyota Hiace today. TDC Automotive, #1 for a reason. Terms and conditions apply.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Welcome back to Inside the News on WinFM 98.9. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to continue this panel discussion. Is access to education equal? We're going to have Senator Dr. Joel Clark of the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party. Dr. Clark?
Hi, good morning again. Now, the question is access to education equal? I think you deliberately framed it that way so that we can be forced to think of the global, regional, and the local aspects to equity in access to education. Now, the fact that the UN Sustainable Development Goals list quality education as goal number 4 suggests that it is one of the most powerful and proven vehicles for achieving any form of sustainable development, ensuring that access to education is equal, but not just any type of education, but quality education. And we have been making some strides globally. However, we still have statistics which are showing that 1 in 4 girls are not in school, or you have 103 million young people worldwide who still lack basic literary skills. Now, St. Kitts remains ahead of the curve for regional action. St. Lucia just last year, June, retired from common entrance exams, something that St. Kitts did since, I think, the late 60s. However, as much as we are the envy of many Caribbean islands, especially larger Caribbean islands, we are not ranked number 1 in terms of our education system. Barbados is actually ranked number 1 in terms of providing the best education system in the region, and it's actually ranked number 19 globally. It's ahead of Canada, which is at number 20. And this is a result of years of investment and budgeting and prioritizing education in Barbados. Now, when we think of CXC, CXC celebrated 40 years in 2019. Now, because of the COVID pandemic, we are questioning the relevance of CXC as a means of determining students' performance after 5 years of education. And so, although many Caribbean islands are moving away from these high-stakes secondary school placement exams, you still have them in some form or the other, and it's still a matter of who has the best access to school, who has the best social network, who has a strong family support, things that can't equal across the board. Now, when you think of equity or equality in access to education in St. Kitts, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, political association, gender, your skill base, your geographic location or spatial reality, and even your religion determines if you have equal access to education. Now, I have to look at the historical trends to sort of set the premise for how St. Kitts has been making serious steps in terms of advancing education and ensuring that everybody, regardless of the fact that you come from a family where your mother was a sugar worker or your father was a banker, you had access to education. So prior to 1966, going to primary school or moving from primary school to secondary school was not a reality. But the administration then, the Labour administration then ensured that people could move from, you could end the end of common entrance exam, and you could move from primary school to secondary school, and secondary school previously was not free. And so removing the cost attached to secondary school was also a step in ensuring equity in access to secondary education. The establishment of new primary schools and infant schools between the period 1968 to 79 also ensured that the geographical inequality was addressed. We had the establishment of the technical college, the establishment of the evening institute for persons who would not have had the opportunity to attend secondary school, the National Work Experience Program in 1995, Project Strong in 98, and more recent trends such as the one graduate per household policy of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, the SIDF loan guarantee, which was a $5 million loan facility, a student assistance fund placed in the development bank to ensure that persons who came from very poor households whose family were just not able to sign for their loans or guarantee their loans could access that facility through the SIDF fund. Now, managing geographical inequalities meant that SKNLP saw the importance of establishing the IT school at the Sadler Secondary to deal with the inequality in access for persons in the St. Paul, St. John, and Nicolatown or Christchurch parish. Access to resources, making wireless internet available in schools, ensuring that teachers were able to move from just talk and chalk to ICT in education. Or we have access to government aid, the REACH program, the GRASP program for graduate students. All of these are hallmarks of the SKNLP administration when it was in power. Now, we have a serious thing to consider, and that's equality in terms of your skill set. Now, as much as we're now moving towards TVET and CVQ for secondary schools, the challenge is that our system still caters to those who are more academically inclined. It's still taboo and stigmatized to do technical skills. We still have students coming in at the first form level and spending up to 3 years without any streamlining towards technical subjects, because if you're doing technical subjects, the stigma here is, oh, you're not so bright. And so the system fails these students for up to 3 years. And then when they get to fourth form, we're like, oh, you have to go to fifth form. You have to attempt even one CXC. And then there's a mad rush for teachers to get these students into one of the skill-based program, whether it's physical education or food and nutrition. Now, a system that caters to everybody, the academically inclined and those with skill set, would address this situation from first form. So that's where we need to go. And I'm happy that I think in March, our minister mentioned that our island, our federation is moving away from the summative assessments, these heavy, high stakes assessments at the end of primary school to determine if you're going to go to 1G1 or 1A1, and the end of streaming, which is something that we needed 5 years ago. Yes, it's going to take a lot to reposition teachers, parents, and students to understand that put everybody in a class, use differentiated learning, use ICT in education, and get everyone on the path, whether it's academic or skills-based, towards, being successful at the secondary level. Now, I think a big part of inequality in access to education is political association or political affiliation. And it's very saddening that we politicize the access to government resources still. Yes, we can paint a very pretty picture, or we can paint the truth, which is every administration has done it. But we're now in 2021 when we need to bridge the digital divide that's really threatening our online learning platform or online learning approach, and recognize that every single student requires access to government resources, regardless of your political association. If this was happening up until 2015, then this needed to end in 2015, because we still have their students I taught in both islands, Nevis and St. Kitts, who still can't access government resources because of political affiliation of parents and grandparents. And this is something that's saddening and disconcerting. And the challenge is governments in the Caribbean and governments in St. Kitts need to recognize that when you get in power, you don't need to end a successful education program simply because you want to institute your own brand of a program, but rather you continue a successful program. So if we had the continuation of the one-to-one laptop program, we would be distributing devices to preschoolers like in Grenada, as opposed to have only successfully distributed just about 1,200 devices to out of 8,000 students. That's sad for St. Kitts and Nevis, for a country that has been ahead in terms of early childhood education, secondary education, loan facilities, tertiary level education. It cannot happen. So this is the real challenge. Yes, if you think about inequality in education, you're going to say from a gendered lens, girls have it more difficult than boys. When you have countries led by oppressive regimes, countries experiencing long-term environmental fallout such as drought or even volcanic eruption, such as what's happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, are countries caught up in war, long-term war. Then you would say, yes, inequality in education is an issue. But it's very sad when you come to a small island and inequality in education is directly linked to political association. That's disheartening and that's unforgivable because
right. Dr. Clark,
we protect our students.
Not-
I'm finished. Thank you. That was the end of my presentation, Devon. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Clark. You were just over time, but thank you so much for your presentation. We're 11:53. We're going to take a break at 12 for the headline news, but just before we do that, we're going to have J.D. Keynes of the Nevis Reformation Party with her presentation, and just encouraging all of you to stick to the time, as remember, we are on air. So 5 minutes, and for the second half, which is advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19, it is 3 minutes. Ms. Keynes, you may go ahead.
Thank you so much, Devon, and I want to thank the panelists who would have spoken before me. I'll try my best to keep it brief to make sure that the Honorable Minister at the federal level gets an opportunity to get in his comments. Now, I think that there are many of us who will form an opinion immediately after hearing this topic, is access to education equal? I mean, for some of us, it's simple, right? It's either yes or no. I think, though, that we should analyze the question, just a bit. What is it really asking? What do we mean by access? And what does it mean for that access to be equal? Okay, so if I were to take the second question first, so when I, like some others, went to the dictionary, I looked for the meaning of the word access, and I found a few, but the one that I think was most suited for this topic, it said that access is freedom or ability to obtain or make use of something. Now, the word equal means regarding or affecting all objects in the same way. It means of the same measure, quantity, amount, or number as another. So in essence, equality means that every individual is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity, though, which is something that would have been mentioned by my colleagues, although it's a similar term, it recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. So some, like my colleagues before me, say that there is equality, but not necessarily equity across the board. Is that the case? Well, I can appreciate that a lot has been done and continues to be done in the area of making education both equal and equitable for our people. We are from different political parties, and I can say that each of the parties here that have had the opportunity to be in government at least one time has done at least one thing to help boost education. That I honestly believe that. But does it mean that there is equality or even equity in education? For the most part, our children have similar opportunities and resources in terms of being able to go to preschool, primary school, high school. Some even go further and enroll in tertiary level education or skills training. But that access, that freedom, or that ability to make use of education is not the same for all. And that is a mixture, in my opinion, of there being a gap as far as equality and equity, are concerned. And I think that a number of factors contribute to this. At the very basic level, very, very basic level, this one is, we have institutions that should be at the same level in our federation when it comes to subject offerings, for example. And so here on Nevis, we have students at let's say the Gingerland Secondary School, just drawing a reference. There are students at the Gingerland Secondary School who may be exposed to different subjects that students at the Charlestown Secondary School may not be exposed to. Yes, don't get me wrong, many of the subjects are the same. They have the same core subjects, etc. But all of the subject offerings aren't the same. So yes, whereas you get a high school education, you are restricted, but because you're restricted because of zoning, you cannot then choose to engage in certain subjects that may be offered at another institution. So that to me is not equality. Now, if I were to shift to equity, which is something that is more highly talked about, let's look at money. You know, it is not free to send children to school, whether public or private. And so, you know, you have to buy uniforms, you have to buy books, you have to buy other learning aids, all these things. And if we were to look at the situation that we are in now, you know, you need a laptop, you need a smartphone or some kind of tablet, you know, you need some sort of device. Not every child has all of the items that I've listed, and this is where the equity comes in. And, you know, it's probably because the parents simply do not have the money to purchase them. I agree that there are some parents who do not prioritize, and, you know, we end up spending money on non-essentials rather than on our children's needs. But the reality is there are some parents who have to choose between buying food and buying a device. There are some parents who have to choose between paying rent and paying the electricity bill. And guess what? If the electricity bill is not paid, then where will you get internet access from in the case of Wi-Fi or even the actual cable? Looking at the home situation, so I'm with equity again. You know, parents need money, as I've mentioned before, to provide for their families. And so some of them end up working, some of us end up working long hours or even late hours or even multiple jobs. In some cases, it means that the older children are left to care for their younger siblings. And, you know, we might say, but I had to do that and I turned out okay. Yes, I mean, that may be so. I can speak to that. I am the first of a few. And so I can speak to that, but we should consider at what level is this acceptable? At what level is this okay? So some children now can't make it to school on time because they tell you that they have to take their siblings to school or daycare. Some don't make it at all because their parents can't afford the daycare. And so the children end up having to stay at home, taking care of their siblings while their parents work. And as I wind down, I also want to point out that we have some students who are dropping out of school for varying reasons. I'm not talking about you get to the age where you are leaving school. I'm talking about children who are dropping out of school. They're not completing school for varying reasons. And in my view, that should come with a penalty. You can't just drop out of school and roam the streets. I think that should come with some sort of penalty. So I don't know how equal that is. And I want to finally just echo Dr. Clark's sentiments as it relates to some extent, you know, let us be wary in terms of politicizing education, because I am a parent. And I wouldn't want to know that my babies are being denied any type of opportunity because I am a politician. You know, nor would I want that for anyone else. And so we can't marginalize children rather, because of their parents' affiliation. So that's my input for now, Devon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Keynes. I know we're at the top of the hour, but allow me to just apologize for the late start, and I will apologize in advance for the late start of the news. I will now allow the Honorable General Powell to make his presentation. Mr. Powell is the Minister of Education in the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, and he is the chairman of the People's Action Movement. Mr. Powell, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Devon, and I'll be as succinct as possible. The advantage of going last is that so much has been said already. Do we have access to equal access to education in St. Kitts and Nevis? I think the general answer is yes. Through successive administrations here, you would have seen the advances to ensure that as many, and I dare say all students, have access to education. And by that I mean institutional education from the early childhood level right through to tertiary. And so we have seen the different policies and that have been implemented over the years to ensure that our students have that access. And it's something that sometimes I think we might take for granted. And there are a number of things that would have contributed or that would have had to have been done over years to ensure this, whether it would have been due to geographical reasons, and you'd have seen in the 80s the People's Action Movement would have built out a number of schools in the rural areas, St. Paul's Primary and others like that, to ensure that even in the rural areas, students had access to schools and to that education. You'd have seen implementation of policies that, like the school meals, the introduction to the school meals feeding program. We understood that not all children had access to proper hot meals, and that in itself affects the ability to learn and the access to education. The implementation of the SELF program, which allowed for students to access books, uniforms, and there's so many more. The introduction of the one-on-one laptop program, and then subsequently the more recent policy by the STEAM Unity administration in terms of making devices available, tablets available to students. These are all very significant moves to ensure that our children here in St. Kitts and Nevis are able to go to a school and are able to get a decent and quality education. And I understand there are a lot of other things that outside of the scope of the government affect a child's ability to go to school. We would have heard about some of the socioeconomic issues, and that is why we have these policies, which many of our counterparts in the region don't have. These, in essence, I think, allow for the equal access. I think Ms. Keynes would have mentioned the fact that you don't have the same course offerings in all schools, and that this is an issue. And I agree. And so that is why we are moving into a period where we're going to be introducing centers of excellence, so that, and we have to bear in mind that we're a small developing country, we have limited resources. And so through centers of excellence, we may say, well, the Charlestown Primary or secondary school is the center of excellence for a particular subject, and that will not stop that will encourage students from Gingerland Secondary to come and access those resources, and vice versa. We have school buses, again, another way in which we are able to allow children to access all of these things that we're doing. When you look at our current curriculum reform program that I'm very happy to be a part of, which is really showing how we are moving away from these one-off tests and exams at the end of a year, and judging students based on that. You'd have heard that we are not using tests of standards to determine what form a child goes into in secondary school, which gives, thereby utilizing continuous assessment over the course of a school year to really give that child better access to the level of education that that child really deserves and is capable of handling. But as we go forward to the curriculum reform, we will be phasing out the streaming. I think Minister Liebert would have spoken a bit about that. We want to go into a system whereby we have less dependency on CXC examinations and these one-off end-of-year examinations, and to create a more holistic learning experience whereby students are not just learning to pass an exam, but are truly learning. And we think that is very important, and that is where this new curriculum is taking us. I think I'll stop there for now. There's so much that has been said and can be said after the lunch break.
Thank you so much, Mr. Powell. We are just 6 minutes past the hour of 12. Again, let me say thank you guys so much for accepting our invitation. Allow me to apologize to those persons viewing via our live stream on Facebook. I know you are unable to see some of the panelists because we were having some technical difficulties with regards to the preparation for the live camera feed, so let me apologize for that, but we'll have that worked out for the second half of the program. We're now going to take this break, and we're going to be back in about 25 minutes, and we will have the second half of this panel discussion. Let's take this break, and we'll be back.
You found the sound. 98.9. Win FM.
We now bring you the headline news. The headline news is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, The Grange, KDP Enterprises, Carib Brewery, and Development Bank.
We are faced with tough decisions every day, but choosing the right home or motor insurance shouldn't be one. You need fast claim settlement from a company that's been rooted for over 31 years. And don't forget the A Excellent rating by AM Best. Make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Reliable insurance that you can count on. Get a quote today for your home, motor, contents, and liability insurance needs, and make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance. Tomorrow secured. Local agents, Dalil Walwyn & Co. Limited. Telephone 465-2631 or 469-5303 for the Nevis office.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
Everyone struggles at times. Even we too have our own struggles. Do you have a loan at the Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis and have fallen behind on your payments because of financial difficulties? Have your financial situation changed? If your answer is yes, visit the Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis or call 465-2288, extension 1101 or 469-5416 to make an appointment to discuss our debt evaluation and restructuring plan with one of our qualified officers. We are committed to working with you to make a sustained positive difference in your life.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
The Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis now has 94 active cases of the coronavirus. Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris addressed the nation Friday night.
Yesterday, Thursday, June 10th, 2021, at an emergency meeting of the Federal Cabinet, the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, informed us that the number of positive cases continue to grow. It was reported that there were 11 positive cases on Wednesday, and that on Thursday, we have recorded another 25 positive cases. This brings the total number of cases to 155, an increase of 111 cases in a short few weeks.
Dr. Harris announced the new curfew hours.
We will therefore place the country under lockdown as of Saturday the 12th June from 6 p.m. for 14 days to Saturday the 26th June in the first instance. Under this lockdown, the Cabinet has determined that people should stay at home over the next 2 weeks. There shall be a curfew daily from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m.
The Prime Minister also outlined the measures in effect between 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. daily.
The new measures will give us respite that should allow for effective control in containing and restricting the spread of the virus. The alternative to not tightening up, not restricting movement, would result in more infections, more stress on our health system, our people, of our overall economy, and a greater likelihood of deaths. The following measures will be implemented to contain the spread of COVID-19 within our communities. The measures become effective, as stated before, from Saturday, June 12, 2021. 1. All essential businesses and offices may continue their business operations by allowing their employees to work remotely from home, utilizing virtual means, unless those employees are permitted to work on the special exemption or are designated as being essential workers. Where a business is unable to continue its business operations by its employees working remotely from home, the business shall cease its operations for the next 2 weeks in the first instance. All persons employed within the public service, a statutory body, a state-owned enterprise, or the courts shall work remotely from home, except as may otherwise be directed by the Cabinet Secretary. All gaming establishments will be closed. Absolutely no mass events. Beaches are to be used for the purpose of exercise only during this period. No street vending for the next 14 days in the first instance. Vending will only be allowed at the public market with controlled spaces where strict adherence to COVID-19 protocols must be observed. There will be no in-person dining at restaurants and bars. However, takeout and delivery will be permitted. Security officers will be enforcing protocols with respect to social distancing and mask wearing. Persons not in compliance will be penalized. Ferry service operations will be subject to heightened restrictions to curtail non-essential inter-island travel. The details of all measures will be formalized in the statutory rules and orders. These are deliberate measures to contain the spread of the virus.
Attorney General Vincent Byron says the standard rules and orders for the new lockdown and curfew announced by Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris Friday night will be announced at the NEOC briefing set for 5 p.m. Saturday.
And there will be a briefing at the National Emergency Operating Center at 5 o'clock this afternoon, where this would be the specifics in the law will be detailed to the public. It will be circulated hopefully before that, but people can respond to it. But this has been the practice over the last year, where we had different individuals who have come forward. Superintendent Carmen Henry has been excellent at explaining what these restrictions are and what the law is. So we'll have that this afternoon for those who may not quite understand by then, to be able to get further explanation.
The Attorney General fielded questions about the new measures on ZIZ with host Jason Davis.
What is the government hoping to accomplish during the next 2 weeks, and what would be the next step?
Again, we want to reduce the movement of people. It's a restriction on movement, because once you move, you can spread the virus. And so the accomplishment basically is to allow the transmission to stop. Ideally, you want a total stop, but people have to live, and people have to have certain services that are done. So it can't be 100% stop. The question is a balance of how much we can relax that complete stop. If the virus does not mix, if me and you are not here, we can't transmit it to each other. That's a stop. And so the next question would be, it allows the health teams to see if people come forward with symptoms, to treat them, to interrupt that spread. Now, 2 weeks, we have told scientifically, is the period of incubation of the virus. And so if there's no movement for 2 weeks, by the end of the 2-week period, it should have incubated and we should be in a position where we reset and then we can move again. Now, exactly what would be the advice of our health professionals if 2 weeks from now we're getting the same numbers that we are getting now? It's unlikely that we'll get those same numbers from a layman's perspective, but we'll have to rely on their advice at that point in time going forward.
Crux of the matter is, first of all, it's not a 24-hour lockdown.
It's not a 24-hour lockdown.
It's more or less an extended curfew with how businesses are, with more restrictions on the businesses.
I'll answer you this way. Time and the meaning of the word. I spent a lot of time and prefaced every question with the general principle. Okay? A curfew is a lockdown. Let's be very clear. So that those who are looking at the semantics and say, oh, it's not this, I'm disappointed, and all of that. It's very clear. From 6 p.m. to 5 a.m., you ain't supposed to move from your home. Unless you're working for Skellig, and somebody electricity gone, or the power station, you're supposed to be home. So consider it a strict lockdown when it comes to curfew.
Okay.
From 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. Very simple principle. 5 a.m. come in the morning to 6 p.m. in the afternoon. There are limited situations where you should leave home. You're supposed to go line by a bar. That's a no-no, and drink rum or beers. But the lineman, I can I go by your friend and stop off? You want to carry your COVID to the friend or your friend give you? We are saying that, restrict that. Slow it down. But I might need to pick up something at the supermarket. You can't go to the supermarket. I have some symptoms. I couldn't go to a medical facility. They're the things, and I think that as our people understand and adapt to this way of life, it helps us to reset.
president of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Giselle Matthews, told WIN in an invited comment that the Chamber supports efforts to control the spread of COVID-19, is seeking clarity on some of the measures announced Friday night.
Let's be clear that the Chamber is very much aware and is very supportive of any restrictions and measures that go into place to try to curtail the community spread and bring things under control. However, having said that, I am concerned that the Chamber, was not consulted in sort of more detail in terms of adding some more value to how we could do this and make it a bit more clear. I think for me as the Chamber President, and the responsibility lies on our shoulders to articulate very clearly to the broader business community what these rules mean for their businesses. Just bearing in mind the Chamber has 130 businesses under its umbrella, and they range from small businesses right up to large businesses, including the manufacturing sector. So it's really critical that we understand what we are articulating to these businesses when we send out a memo or any sort of release.
Mrs. Matthews urged businesses to comply with the COVID-19 protocols and recommended special measures to be put in place for people who are already vaccinated.
We know from the numbers that quite a few have gone out there. Many persons who had their own, concerns, fears, whatever, for whatever reason about becoming vaccinated, took the plunge and did the right thing, as we often hear in health. I feel there should be some allowance for those persons to function and to be able to go out and make a living every day, and not the people who are not vaccinated, working in essential services, having the ability to work, earn, not vaccinate, but still earn a living. That is where the Chamber has an issue. Is that, so for those who have vaccinated, had a second jab, what the AG just said, received the ultimate protection in the vaccine, are being asked to stay at home and not function and not be able to work. The Chamber has a concern with that. I would like to see that retracted. I would like to have the ability to have the conversation.
The 11:45 a.m. edition of The Big Stories on Observer Radio, News Talk 911.
Welcome back to The Big Stories. First of this hour, one of the legal representatives for Indian fugitive Mehul Choksi has filed a complaint with the War Crimes Unit in the UK's Metropolitan Police on the ground that Choksi was tortured. The lawyer Michael Polak alleges that there was a huge breach of the rule of law.
In this case, what's happened to Mr. Choksi is he's been brutally kidnapped from Antigua, and he's been taken by a small boat to a larger boat. That boat has travelled to Dominica. In Dominica, he was handed over to their customs agents who passed him on to the police. They kept him without a lawyer for 3 days until very resourceful Dominican lawyers managed to get in to see him and get an account from him. We believe that what was intended was for him to be removed from Dominica before anyone knew he was there. The Indian private jet, which was on the island at the time, seems to support that suggestion. What happened was a piece of paper was put in front of him. He was asked to sign it. He was told, if you sign this, you go back to Antigua. But he didn't see the word Antigua on that piece of paper. So quite rightly, in my opinion, he decided not to sign it, because we think it's more than likely that this was getting him to sign an agreement to go back to India, tricking him into signing that. So it's been a huge breach of the rule of law.
Pollock believes that the War Crimes Unit of the UK's Metropolitan Police will be thorough in investigating the matter.
In regards to complaints which are made to the Metropolitan Police War Crimes team, they're set up specifically to look at international crimes, so crimes which happen outside of the jurisdiction of England and Wales, or outside of the whole of the United Kingdom. So what happens is they consider things properly themselves. So they'll consider the evidence. They will ask people who may be alleged to have been involved to come in for interviews, and they will follow proper police processes. It's not the UK government. Some people will ask, is this the UK government getting involved in something overseas? It's not. It's an independent process which considers whether there is evidence that crimes have taken place.
On the other hand, the UK lawyer says they believe political interference may affect the investigation in Antigua.
We say there's very strong evidence about what's taking place, who's involved. The individuals who are involved have all been named in the media. They include British nationals, they include a St. Lucian national, and the evidence is there. All this really needs is a proper investigation. Whether that's going to happen in Antigua with political pressures and that kind of thing going on, we're not so confident of that. And the police in Antigua need to be able to operate outside of political influence. This is a major international crime which has taken place, which started in Antigua. They have the evidence. They have all the evidence showing exactly what happened on that day.
Pollack also claims that Choksi was unlawfully renditioned from Antigua and Barbuda to Dominica, so he would no longer have the option of appealing to the UK Privy Council against efforts to strip him of his Antiguan citizenship. A British lawyer representing the businessman contended on Thursday. Dominica dropped the London-based Judicial Committee of the Privy Council as the country's final court of appeal in 2015. However, citizens of Antigua and Barbuda voted in a constitutional referendum in 2018 to retain the body as their final court of appeal. Choksi's lawyers contend that he continues to be an Antiguan citizen and can appeal against any move to strip him of his citizenship or to extradite him to India in the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. However, he wouldn't have access to this legal protection in Dominica. Pollack explained that the nature of the crime enables it to be tried by the Privy Council.
In United Kingdom law, there are crimes of universal jurisdiction. And what that means is it doesn't matter where the crimes take place. The English courts have jurisdiction to try them. And it's a general principle of international law that some crimes are so terrible that it shouldn't matter where they take place, that states can try them. In the United Kingdom, those crimes include war crimes, genocide, and torture. So the UK has a procedure to look at those types of offences. The policy of the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police War Crimes Team, who look at those kind of offences, is to look at whether individuals have some kind of connection to the United Kingdom. So if they're UK residents, or they spend a lot of time in the United Kingdom, or they're UK nationals.
That was Michael Pollack, barrister at Church Court Chambers in London and Director of Justice Abroad. Michal Choksi was again denied bail Friday night by the High Court in Dominica. His application was denied on the basis that he's a flight risk. He has no ties to Dominica, and the court cannot impose any conditions that will assure it that he wouldn't abscond. Choksi was represented by Cara Shillingford Marsh, Wayne Benjamin Marsh, Wayne Nord, and Julian Prevot. Observer also learned that Choksi's lawyers were not allowed to cross-examine the Director of Public Prosecutions, whose argument they believed were flawed. The 62-year-old, who is wanted in his native India in connection with a massive bank fraud, will appear before the court again on Monday on a charge of illegal entry into Dominica. Choksi denies the charge and claims that he was kidnapped and taken there by force.
Live from NPR News, I'm Giles Snyder. Police in Austin, Texas are examining surveillance footage and asking the public for information on the shooting overnight in the city's downtown entertainment district. Authorities say a gunman wounded 13 people, 2 of them critically, before getting away. EU leaders attending the G7 summit are sparring with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. They want Johnson to keep his word on the Brexit deal amid trade tensions over Northern Ireland. The BBC's Rob Watson reports that Prime Minister Johnson is calling for pragmatism and compromise.
The G7 summit appears to be only heightening tensions between the EU and Britain over post-Brexit arrangements in Northern Ireland. It's reported President Macron told Boris Johnson he had to stick by agreements reached with Brussels if he wanted a reset in Anglo-French relations. But earlier, Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab blamed the EU for post-Brexit trade problems in Northern Ireland, accusing Brussels of being bloody-minded and purist over implementing post-Brexit arrangements. EU trust in Britain is low, and the antipathy appears to be mutual.
The Biden administration is weighing a bipartisan compromise with Congress on the president's massive infrastructure proposal. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports that a group of Senate Republicans and Democrats reached an agreement on a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package this week, but it's still far from a done deal.
The lawmakers call the agreement a realistic compromise to modernize the nation's infrastructure and energy technologies. The senators say the plan would be fully paid for and not include tax increases, bypassing President Biden's proposal to raise the corporate tax rate to offset the spending. The bipartisan effort is the most significant development yet in negotiations, but the plan is still facing skepticism from lawmakers on both sides. The deal was announced shortly after talks broke down between the president and the Senate's lead Republican negotiator this week. The White House says it appreciates the work to advance the legislation, but says questions need to be addressed, specifically around the details of both policy and pay-fors. Windsor Johnston, NPR News.
Attorney General Merrick Garland is pledging to defend voting rights as the cornerstone of American democracy.
There are many things that are open to debate in America, but the right of all eligible citizens to vote is not one of them.
Speaking yesterday, Garland outlined a series of measures the Justice Department is taking in remarks to the Department's Civil Rights Division. He said at least 14 states have passed new laws this year that make it harder to vote following former President Donald Trump's false claims about the 2020 election. You're listening to NPR News.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. World leaders attending the G7 summit in Britain have agreed to launch a massive spending plan for infrastructure investment in developing countries to counter China's growing global influence. But the German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the group is not yet in a position to release the funds. From Cornwall, here's Nomia Iqbal.
China is really on the mind of the US president, and he, to put it bluntly, doesn't want China to become the success story of the 21st century, and he is hoping that his G7 allies will see eye to eye with him. Now, this all comes down to China's Belt and Road Initiative, and Joe Biden wants to offer an alternative vision in which he says is more in line with the values of global democracies. And he's come up with this plan, Build Back Better World, and it's essentially an infrastructure finance mechanism that's designed to help poorer and lower-income countries.
EU leaders at the G7 summit have warned their host, Boris Johnson, to keep his word on the Brexit deal with the bloc amid tensions over Northern Ireland. The dispute centres on checks on goods and livestock that are meant to take place between the British mainland and Northern Ireland. Mr Johnson said the EU misunderstood the situation in Northern Ireland.
I think that we'll have some pragmatic solutions, and if we don't, then I think that what our friends have also understood is that it's the prime duty of the UK government to uphold the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom, and that's what we're going to do.
Police in Nigeria have arrested protesters in the cities of Lagos and Abuja and have used tear gas to disperse the crowds. Witnesses said some police fired their guns into the air. Activists called the demonstrations to protest about the country's worsening security situation and the government's recent ban on the social media platform Twitter. Large numbers of armed security personnel were deployed ahead of the protests, at which some demonstrators called for President Muhammadu Buhari to step down.
We must protest our rights. This is our rights. Revolution must start from today. So all this killing must stop. All this bad government must stop. Buhari, we don't need you again. There is problem in this country. So now you don't cause divide in this country. And this nonsense must stop. This is our country. Buhari must go. Buhari must leave this country.
The former parliamentary speaker in Iran, Ali Larijani, has called on the powerful Guardian Council to disclose publicly why it barred him from standing in next week's presidential election. On Twitter, Mr. Larijani urged the council, which vets election candidates, to state all the reasons for his disqualification. World news from the BBC. At least 7 people have been killed in 2 separate explosions targeting minibuses in the Afghan capital, Kabul. A doctor at one hospital said they were treating 6 injured people. The blast took place in a neighbourhood dominated by the ethnic Hazara minority, where attacks on buses earlier this month killed 12 people. The French authorities have deployed specialist teams to try to contain and disperse 2 oil slicks that are drifting towards the coast of the island of Corsica in the Mediterranean. Danny Eberhard reports.
The operation to limit the threat from the slicks involves naval ships, planes and local police. One slick has already drifted to within a kilometre of Corsica's east coast. The viscous, toxic oil threatens the region's tourism and its environment. The authorities are trying to seal off lagoons with barriers. They've banned fishing and are telling residents to stay away from beaches. Prosecutors are investigating what boats were in the area. Illegal dumping, such as when ships clean their tanks, is a major problem in the Mediterranean. Few such incidents result in successful prosecutions.
Australian swimming's governing body is setting up an independent panel to investigate claims of misogyny and abuse made by one of the country's star athletes. It follows the withdrawal of Maddie Groves on Wednesday from trials for this year's Olympics. The Rio Olympics silver medalist complained on social media of misogynists and perverts exploiting women in the sport. In the first of the day's matches at the Euro 2020 Football Championship, Wales have drawn 1-1 with Switzerland. The match was played in the capital of Azerbaijan, Baku. It's the first major international tournament since the pandemic. Later, Denmark face Finland in Group B in Copenhagen. It's the Finns' first appearance at a major finals. BBC News.
That was the Win FM Headline News. The Win FM Headline News was brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, The Grange, KDP Enterprises, Carib Brewery and Development Bank.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organisation on St Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Everyone struggles at times. Even we too have our own struggles. Do you have a loan at the Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis and have fallen behind on your payments because of financial difficulties? Have your financial situation changed? If your answer is yes, visit the Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis or call 465-2288, extension 1101 or 469-5416 to make an appointment to discuss our debt evaluation and restructuring plan with one of our qualified officers. We are committed to working with you to make a sustained positive difference in your life.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
We are faced with tough decisions every day, but choosing the right home or motor insurance shouldn't be one. You need fast claim settlement from a company that's been rooted for over 31 years. And don't forget the A Excellent rating by AM Best. Make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Reliable insurance that you can count on. Get a quote today for your home, motor, contents, and liability insurance needs, and make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance. Tomorrow secured. Local agents, Dalil Walwyn & Co. Limited. Telephone 465-2631 or 469-5303 for the Nevis office.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
People make the world go
Know that you captured those special moments. Turn them into lasting memories at the TDC Business Center. Purchase your photo print bundle and get a chance to win a Canon MG3010 printer. Click and print. Visit TDC Business Center today.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go.
Welcome back to Inside of the News on WinFM 98.9. I'm your host, Devon Cornelius. I trust that you had a very good lunch. I think I had one too. But welcome back to Inside the News on WinFM 98.9. For those of you who just tuned in, the conversation is centered around education. Is access to education equal? we had representatives from the political parties in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I think the general consensus was there is access to education, but the question was equity. So there is access to education here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We're now going to look at our subtopic, which is advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. And if I may give my take on this topic, I decided to reserve my comments for this section of the panel discussion. During the early onset of the pandemic last year, I was given the opportunity to be part of a team to conduct some online classes for students at the primary level. And the St. Kitts and Nevis CARICOM Youth Ambassadors Corps, we came together and we said, we're going to do some classes. And so we had English, mathematics, social studies, all of the subjects that are offered at the primary level. And in my capacity as the public relations officer for that group, we were able to put this together. And I think it was an advantage coming out of a change because of COVID-19. The change was we were unable to meet physically to do this. And so we had to go to an online platform. And I was given the opportunity for the very first time to teach. And so it was very new to me, but it was a wonderful experience. And I think it was an opportunity for me to touch lives of young people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So for me, that was one of the advantages due to a change because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which would restrict us from having face-to-face contact. But welcome back to this program. I am going to allow the panelists to give their take on advantages from changes in COVID-19, in education, due to COVID-19. Again, let me say good afternoon to all of you who are joining us. Of course, those of you in Radio Land, those of you who have joined via our website at www.winmediaskn.com, and those of you joining via our social media platforms. You're listening to Win FM's panel discussion with representatives from the political parties here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Before I continue, let me just give you the quick guidelines for the second half. Members of the public will be allotted a maximum of just 2 questions at a time per panelist. The phone lines will open for just 10 minutes, after which panelists will respond to questions as directed. And each panelist will have 2 to 3 minutes to respond to these questions. But the phone lines are not yet open. We're going to start the second half of this program, and we're going to begin with Mr. Craig Tuckett of the People's Labour Party with his presentation. Mr. Tuckett.
Okay, thank you very much. So this aspect of the discussion has to deal with now the pandemic that we all are facing. And I must give commendations to the administration led by our political leader and Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris, and his team in the administration for doing so well. Of course, led by the very able and distinguished health practitioners who have been able to keep our country having one of the lowest active cases of COVID in the region, and might I say in the world. So we just have to continue to apply our education, our mindset, so that we can continue to ensure that we all keep safe and that our lives are indeed preserved. So it is important for us to note that in relation to equity, though, we need to consider how the use of ICTs during this COVID pandemic can help us now to further advance our economic plan development or economic development for our nation, and by extension our service of education to our people. Because we must understand that even though with the COVID, life still goes on, even though with the pandemic, life still goes on. So the administration and also those of us who have attained higher education have to consider the use of ICT and how it can be advantageous for us to use ICTs to deliver high quality education. So I would like to just take this point in the argument. Equity is now needed because we all agree that our governments, as we all say, government is continuous. From the time we gained independence, or should I say, from the time we gained adult suffrage and were able to get political independence, we were able to, at a point in time, ensure that all our nationals have equal access to education. But what is important is that we realize that not all of our nationals have the same learning capacity and the same abilities, as was mentioned earlier by our previous colleagues, that yes, persons may have aptitude for skills, whether it be in the construction, whether it be in mechanics, whether it be in agriculture. These fields are skill-based, but we need still now to enhance those persons or those students or those citizens who show aptitude for higher cognitive development and activity. And that is why I believe now the issue of equity needs to be addressed, because for too long, during maybe in the past 40 years or maybe 30 years, that aspect of our nation development and the development of our young people and our people in a whole has been put to the curb. And let me say why that I've said this. So in the past, we used to have grammar school. We used to have schools that are specialized in developing the cognitive aspects of persons who have higher IQs. With those, or from that quadre of persons, we can develop leaders. We can see our future prime ministers, ministers of education, ministers of health, ministers of finance. It is through that development and that identification of those persons who have those skill sets that we can put them into a specialized school, a high quality system of education. And so we develop them in political development, in finance development, in finance management, in law, in medicine. And we need those in our development of our nation. And so when I say equity, maybe we need to reassess how we should now channel not all, but some resources and gear it to the development of those category of people. Some may say that it's elitist. No, we are speaking, I'm speaking as a policy developer, as we all should. Those of us who have attained higher education, we need to now think outside of the box. And so I know I'm limited to a amount of time, but I would like to encourage all of us who are in this panel and also the general public who are listening. We need to consider equity in regards of developing the resources that are needed to develop our high level IQ human resource, and then from there we can see the country developing to further advance areas of diversifying our economy. Like I've said before, trading online, forex exchange, Bitcoin, and the like. And so in closing, we must continue along this new world order. I must say that's what it is, where we are now using ICTs to communicate. I'm here on Zoom. I am communicating with all my other brothers and sisters, my colleagues, because we have new protocols, and that has restricted our movement because we're trying to be safe. But we can still have intellectual discourse through the use of the ICT, through the Zoom platform. And that is the same methodology we should also use for advancing the education. And I do believe this is advantageous for small developing countries like ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Powell. Allow me to just quickly apologize. We were unable to sort out the technical difficulty we experienced earlier with regards to persons viewing us via the live stream. So as it is now, people viewing via Facebook will only be seeing our pictures versus the live actual feed of us in our living rooms or whatever the case may be. So let me apologize for that, but hopefully for future, we can definitely have that sorted out. We're going to continue this discussion, and we're going to have the Honorable Troy Liburd, who is the Junior Minister of Education for Nevis, and he's the chairman of the Concerned Citizens Movement, CCM. Mr. Liburd is going to give his take on advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. Mr. Liburd, you may go ahead.
Thanks once again, Devon, and of course, pleasant good afternoon to all who are listening to Win FM. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly hit us at a time when nobody was expecting, and has certainly hit us in ways that before this, nobody could have ever appreciated the existence of things such as a lockdown or a curfew and these type of things. Certainly they were alien to us here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Definitely in my lifetime, I have never seen anything of the like. We were pretty much busy in 2019 and in the early part of 2020 in January and the beginning of February, doing all of the regular things that we had set out to do, all of our initial goals and so on we had. And then COVID-19 comes in, and then shortly after that, we get our first case here in the Federation. And then we proceed to a hard lockdown, of course, 24-hour lockdown and so on, with specific shopping days and, you know, things that we had never seen before. And then we had to proceed to online learning with education. Of course, we have all seen the proliferation of the internet. When I was a youngster, there was no such thing as YouTube and Facebook and so on. And pretty much now, almost everybody has access to, you know, the internet in one form or the other, whether you have access to a computer, access to a phone or tablet. If it's not your own phone or your own tablet, some parent or cousin or family member would have one. And, you know, kids are exposed to these at a very, very early age. So we've all seen the usefulness of technology and the usefulness of the internet. And so what COVID-19 did was to give us a jolt into that direction. We always knew that we were moving in the direction of more technology. In fact, over here on Nevis, we had partnered together with our service providers here on Nevis, who provide us with internet, to start a project of bringing broadband internet into all of the schools on Nevis. In fact, we bought some over 300 megabytes of broadband to be distributed or to be shared up between all of our schools here on Nevis. And if you're somebody who know about technology, you know that is a lot of bandwidth that the NIA had committed to, and it comes at a really significant cost to the NIA. But we have realized that technology is important, and we want our students to be able to take full advantage of that. So COVID-19 gave us a jolt in that direction, where we had to get online if we wanted to reach our students. We are at the position now where all of our schools are on Microsoft Teams. So when just about a week ago, you know, we had to go back to the situation where schools are now closed physically. All of our schools, certainly I can speak for Nevis, we had already ensured that all of our students were registered on the Microsoft Teams platform. That's our students in the primary school and our students at the high school level. And of course, even though we have pretty much 100% enrollment, there are probably some students who have not come on for whatever the reasons are. But our teachers, they are doing the roll call every day when they have their various classes. And students who have been missing from classes, the teachers find ways how to reach out to the students, reach out to the parents of the students to figure out exactly what the reasons are for why they are not in classes. One of the things that happened here on Nevis, and while all of the schools did not do the same thing, at least some of the schools were doing it, was that even though we went back to in-person classes from last year, September, the schools remained on the Microsoft Teams platform. They continued to do some of the classwork on the Microsoft Teams platform, so that students would get accustomed to the platform, teachers would get accustomed to the platform, they use it regularly. So the transition back to using it as our primary means of reaching the student was not such a difficult transition once we decided to go back that way. The thing with COVID is that, being in the Ministry of Education, we do not control COVID. We do not control everything that people out there in the society do. So we are sort of at the mercy of persons. We've seen that here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we now have a situation of community spread. We have been able to stem that before for most of 2020 and the better part of the early part of this year, we had no community spread. We have now been told that we have community spread. That is not something that the Ministry of Education had any control over. But of course, we have to work with the hand that has been dealt with to us. But the use of technology is probably if I could say, an advantage that has come out of it. And it's very difficult to call anything an advantage because, we don't have our students in class where they can actually speak to the teacher, have that teacher there physically with them. But the platform provides a basis for them to have something similar. Although it's not the same thing, it's similar. And, we're not at home with students. So we're at the mercy of the fact that students will have to log on to the internet. In some cases, and I would think that there will be very rare cases, there are some students who probably would not have access because of devices or whatever. But since last year, on both islands, in St. Kitts and on Nevis, the ministries had provided for all students to be able to get access to devices. For some students who did not have internet in their home, free internet was provided. I think this free internet was provided for about 3 to 4 months. I think in some cases it would have gone on even longer. So that was put in for the students. I think that some of the parents, the guardians, would have continued with the internet service. And so most students across the board have access to the Microsoft Teams platform. Most students across the board have access to devices, be it tablets or computers or whatever the case may be. For teachers, here on Nevis, we were able to take all of the taxes off of devices. And also for parents of students, we provided the Nevis Island Administration took the taxes off of devices. So for persons who wanted to go and order a tablet or a computer for their son or daughter, we provided for that to be done without any duties or anything like that. And I believe that those provisions are still in place even now. So persons who probably don't want to use a government-issued tablet, they can go and purchase a tablet and they would get it free of all duties and so on. So COVID has given us a jolt in the direction where we use technology a lot more now, but it's someplace where we were always headed. With those words, I want to hand back over to you, Mr. Cornelius.
Thank you so much, Mr. Libert. We are just 5 minutes past the hour of 5. You're listening to 1FM 98.9. This is a panel discussion with representatives from the different political parties here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We're going to continue as we are strapped for time. So we're going to continue again. The subtopic is advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. And I would encourage the panelists to try their best to stick to the stipulated time. We're now going to have Senator Dr. Joyelle Clarke of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party with her presentation. Remember, your presentation should be just 3 minutes. Dr. Clarke, you may go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon again. Now, when you think of the advantages of COVID-19 in terms of how it relates to education, you first have to, what are the changes? So we moved online. There was no final exams last year for first to fourth formers and primary schoolers, and parents became even more integrated in the instructional approach to teaching, the instruction from home. The disadvantage is the digital divide that gap in the digital divide hasn't been effectively addressed. That's a disadvantage there. Now, the challenge is when you think of the advantages of the changes, now the stress of that final placement exam has been alleviated for most of our first to fourth formers and now our primary school students, but it also brings about the challenge of, are they placed appropriately? How do we really assess their performance when some formative assessments weren't standardized? Another advantage is the integration of ICT in teaching. Now, many teachers were a little bit averse to using technology in the classroom. Some teachers have been there in the system for over 25 years, aren't really au fait with the technology, but everyone was forced to go online and everyone was forced to use their email, to use social media. And this brings us to another advantage, which is the important role of social media and social media influencers in advancing education. We recognize that teachers, parents, and the community started accepting that social media, WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, even TikTok could be a form of sharing information, and Twitter, of course. And then we've seen some telecommunications partnerships between the government, teachers, schools, and corporate telecommunication providers. But I dare say that that corporate responsibility has not been shouldered enough, because whereas a country like Jamaica, which has as many students as our population in St. Kitts and Nevis, and Digicel there could provide zero-rated data, mobile data to every single student. Here we have 8,000 students, and that facility hasn't been provided. There hasn't even been a conversation around providing zero-rated mobile data on students' phone. Yes, the advantage is some students have been able to get Wi-Fi and internet in their homes, but what of the other students who don't have access? Another advantage is that we are now seeing a lot of the inequalities in the education sector being unveiled because of COVID-19. We're recognizing that school was the safe place for a lot of students and now having to remain home, where it's not very comfortable, where the environment at home doesn't facilitate learning, that there's more that can be done, and social services has now seen another gateway into improving the delivery of social services of psychological support to students and to teachers in some cases. So the advantages are important, but with each advantage, we also recognize that there are some disadvantages and some very disconcerting situations that still need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clarke. We're going to continue, and we're going to have Ms. J.D. Keynes of the Nevis Reformation Party. Ms. Keynes?
Good afternoon, Devon, and good afternoon to everyone who stayed with us. And, you know, you're listening here on Win FM. Now, while participating in this discussion, I got a series of bad news. And so I know I alluded to, or I mentioned earlier that, we just want to remember those who are bereaved, but that list has become longer. And so I just want to reach out and extend condolences to everyone who may be going through a difficult time, because sometimes you are bereaved, not necessarily by virtue of being a family member, but by virtue of being a close friend or a neighbor, someone who you grew up with, someone who is now bereaved. So let us just try to remember all who are bereaved at this time. Now, nobody wants COVID, at least I think. I don't think that anybody wants COVID. I don't think that anybody in St. Kitts and Nevis was happy that our country was faced with COVID-19. But I do believe that with COVID came some advantages. It's a funny term to put with, funny classification to put with this dreaded virus that has been taking people's lives. But we did say that the topic is advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. And some of these advantages that, from my standpoint, are, let's see, children now get to explore different kinds of learning. Some may prefer using the tablet or computer. That is being done right now. And, we can show the importance of learning in different ways. One of the panelists would have mentioned earlier, differentiated learning. And this is one aspect of differentiated learning. As a parent and as a tutor, when I teach, I refer to the class teacher's notes, I refer to the textbook, then I go online and I get another version. I have found that this helps to drive the point home, especially when you're dealing with children who like to say, teacher say, or they have one thing in their mind and they're not willing to accept anything else. So you're just trying to show them from different angles. And so I found that because you're now using the tablet and the computer, there are some children who gravitate to this. They prefer this rather than, the chalk and board. Also, I find that many parents weren't aware of their children's learning status prior to COVID. And so now we find that parents are spending more time with their children and they are understanding their children. And so some parents are finally now seeing the challenges that teachers have been facing with our children. And some of us, because some of us as parents, we may not want to hear this, but we want to take a hands-off approach. Not all of us, some of us want to take a hands-off approach and expect teachers to work miracles, and it doesn't work like that. And so in this COVID-19 era, I have found that we are forced to spend more time with our children. We are there with them, and so we realize some of the challenges that they've been facing. In some cases, some parents didn't know, not because they didn't want to know, but they didn't realize it from this level, at this level. So that's an advantage in my opinion. Also, it helps everyone understand that you can't get too comfortable. So you should always be looking for more. So the teachers now can't just teach the new students the same way, or can't automatically teach the new students the same way that they would have taught students of the past, and the students themselves, they now have to do more, and the same applies to the parents. So people can't now be too comfortable with what existed. We understand now that times are changing, and so we have to change with the times. Another advantage, I think, to some extent, I am seeing people, generally being more helpful. So, for example, some parents realize that other children may not have devices. They're without certain tools, certain necessities. And so they've been offering to share with these children or even purchase with the children. And in some cases, the business community has been doing that as well. And so I want to commend the persons who have done so. So to some extent, persons are being a little bit more caring. So that in itself is an advantage as well. Also, students get to look at the careers that continue to be functional during the COVID-19 era. So for example, prior to COVID-19, some students either didn't know what career path they wanted to take, or they had their mindset on a particular path because they figured, it looks great, it sounds fancy. However, during the COVID-19 era, they were able to look at the businesses that were able to remain open, the businesses that continue to be successful. So children can now assess which ones they really want to be a part of. And I think that's a good thing. As I wind down, I also think that we get to fast track to some extent, our approach to education and learning in St. Kitts and Nevis. Because even though certain things were considered, and we've heard the ministers mention that there are certain things that had been in place, and we know that because education is continuous, governments are continuous, and so we know there are certain things that had been in place. But now it's like we have a real situation that has come up, that has arisen, and so it's the perfect opportunity for us to roll out some of these things that we had been discussing for some time. And one example is, the move away from the single assessments. And so those are some of the advantages that have come along with the changes in education due to COVID-19. I want to say, though, before I pass it over, that I do not at all think that education or handling the educational affairs of our country is an easy task. And so I want to commend those who would have been instrumental in getting it to where it is at today. But I want to stress, and I will continue to stress, that education should not be politicized, and because we won't get very far if we take this divisive approach. And so the more we can engage each other, the more we can get for our children, our children's children. I can't just speak as a politician. I have to speak as a parent, because anything my child is a part of, I'm front and center. If you want, Ms. Keynes, we need, okay, no problem. That's me, because I want to know that I am contributing, and there are many parents like that. And so I am hoping that going forward, we take a more holistic and all-inclusive approach to how we deal with education, just so that we can benefit our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Keynes. I think this panel discussion is going very well. We are just 14 minutes past the hour of 1, and we're now going to go with the Honorable Jonel Powell, Minister of Education in the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, and he's the chairman of the People's Action Movement. Mr. Powell, you may begin.
Thank you. I think the first advantage that we need to acknowledge is the fact that COVID has caused us to do in perhaps maybe 10 weeks what we were unable to do or did not do for 10 years prior. Up to the time of closure of schools and the lockdowns last year due to COVID, the Ministry of Education was already in the process of looking to transition into a system whereby we could offer those online modalities, to be able to utilize tablets and all the technological ways of providing instruction. But it was taking time. Whether we are trying to achieve perfection or the resources may not have necessarily been readily available. But once COVID hit, we pushed that urgent button and we were able to do it. Was it perfect? No, it wasn't. But it created a platform by which we could still continue instruction. And we've seen how we've developed and built upon that 1 year later. A significant advantage that we cannot forget is the fact that St. Kitts and Nevis is the only country in the Caribbean that has been successful in having full-time face-to-face instruction in schools for the entire academic year. Albeit we did start off on a shift system, but we were able to have that in school, in classroom, face-to-face instruction, and we were able to complete our academic year and the syllabus by the time we were forced to close schools a few weeks ago. I think that is significant, and that is not just by chance. Part of it has to do with the excellent management of the COVID-19 pandemic in St. Kitts and Nevis by our authorities and by our people. We rightfully big up the authorities and the health team. I don't think we give enough props to our people who have been trying their best to abide by the non-pharmaceutical procedures and who've been going out and getting vaccinated and all that. But in addition to that, it showed the strength of our new curriculum that I've referenced on a number of occasions. The fact that when we were able to shut down, although we did have end of term and end of year exams scheduled, and we are in a position where we have to cancel them, because of the development of the curriculum, we were able to and are able to rely on continuous assessment from throughout the year so that the children will not be at any disadvantage in terms of their progression to the next level of their education. I think that is something significant that we have to look at. And I want to agree with the sentiment that COVID has, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it has allowed us to really take stock of where we're at, to see the gaps in our system, to see where we can improve, to see where new models have come through that we may not have looked at. I really want to acknowledge all of our teachers. I think the teachers have really been the stars when it comes to the successes of our educational sector over the course of the past year. Teachers have really been going above and beyond, and particularly when it comes to the online instruction, some of them have really just created such a paradigm shift that some students are saying, look, we don't want to go back to face-to-face school, we want to do this online thing. And that's really good because it means that they're engaging and keeping those students interested in the school system. I would have heard reference made to the fact that, we only would have issued or allocated 1,200 tablets and things like this, and emphasis being put on the shortfalls. Now, in relation to that particular program, devices were allocated based on the communicated needs coming from the students. And so we provided devices based on the need that was communicated to the Ministry of Education. We would have given various surveys and instruments for students to take home. And there was some misunderstanding. And these are things that we have to acknowledge and to build upon. So some students thought that the cell phone that they had is a sufficient device, which was not the case. Some parents really just did not show the necessary interest to provide the information that was needed. And so what would have happened was, devices that students would have had devices at the time, and then the devices got damaged after, and so they were left without one. And so that created a shortfall. We are trying to rectify that. We are trying to fill that gap. We have already engaged and sourcing additional devices that we are going to be allocating. But I want to use the opportunity to really encourage parents and guardians to show a lot more interest in what is happening with children and in schools, because when the unfortunate like this happens and we have lockdowns, I have had calls from parents saying, we're locking down, but my child doesn't have a device. But that parent never before showed interest in getting a device for the child. It is only now that something is happening that they're doing so. And I want to just encourage parents to do that. Teachers are really putting out that effort. We as parents need to put out the effort. I love to hear Ms. Keynes speak with the passion with which she did in terms of the support she provides for her child and school. And I think that's the kind of thing that we all need to chip in and help to provide. And before I end on this note, I've heard some references to students not having equal access or equity due to political reasons. Well, let me say this. I personally was affected by educationally due to political reasons. When I went to UWI and the St. Kitts Nevis government at the time, back in 2001, I believe it was, refused to pay for my economic costs. And my parents had to do what they had to do to find that cost. And because of that experience, I vowed that I would never allow, as long as I had the power, that to happen to anybody else. And so fast forward a few years, as I am now the Minister of Education, as far as I'm concerned, there's no rule for any sort of politicization within the sector. And so I think it was Senator Clark would have raised it earlier. And so I invite you, my good friend Senator, to off air indicate to me any instances where you would have seen this, or any instances that you're aware of where persons are being victimized within the educational sector because of politics. And I will personally ensure that those matters are looked into and investigated, because with everything that we are going through, COVID and beyond, this is not time for us to continue to put these political wedges between us as a people. We need to empower our young people and empower our students. I know you are a very passionate teacher, and so I look forward to working with you to ensure that we get that out of our system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Powell. And let me just use this opportunity to say thank you to all of you again for accepting our invitation. I think you would agree with me when I say this was a very fruitful discussion, and it was an opportunity for me to hear from not just representatives of the different political parties in St. Kitts and Nevis, but all of you have had or have a connection to education. Of course, with Mr. Powell and Mr. Liburd being our ministers of education here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and Ms. Keynes, Mr. Tuckett, and Ms. Clark being educators. So I think the panel discussion went very well. And again, thank you guys so much for accepting our invitation. And I look forward to continuing or to having discussions such as these. It is 27 minutes past the hour of 1. We're still going to open the phone lines. We're going to allow some more time. Again, let me apologize for the late start we had earlier. And we're going to open the phone lines. The numbers to call are 466-0989-762 and 662. You can call us and be a part of this discussion. We are going to have to limit the calls because of the time frame, but indeed, the phone lines are open. We have our first call. Let us take this call. Caller, you can pose just 2 questions.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Let us take this call.
I want to ensure that I'm not wrong when I heard Mr. Tuckett say that St. Kitts is no longer considered a developing country. I would like him to clarify that statement, whether he did in fact make just a statement that St. Kitts is no longer considered a developing country. Now, a comment. I thought that one or more of the panelists would have provided a historical background with respect to access to education in St. Kitts. I was looking forward to someone tracing the antecedents, the historical antecedents of education with respect to access, especially from the post-emancipation period right up to this moment. I found that was lacking. I think it would have brought further clarity and completion, in manner of speaking, to the entire discussion on access. I think where we came from would have provided a nice introduction as to where we are now. With respect to changes brought about as a result of COVID in education, I'm wondering whether any of the panelists found that, well, I think it's generally, our education system is very teacher-centered, teacher-dependent. So did any one of you find that students became more independent learners as a result of COVID, having to stay home and learn from home in the absence of the direct intervention of the teacher? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, caller, so much for your question. We're going to take some more calls, and after we're going to have the responses for these questions. We're going to take some other calls. Do we have a caller on the line? We have a call. Let's take this call. Caller, good afternoon. You're on air.
Good afternoon. I want to know the status of the step assigned teachers to private schools. I have a problem with the workers. During the lockdown, I was asked if they weren't supposed to come out and assist with preparing items for the preschoolers. I was told by the Nevis and the Sinkis office they are supposed to stay home. They would tell us as private providers we are responsible for them, but on certain instances they would let us know that STEP is paying them. So I think that needs to be clarified. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your call. Let us take just 2 more calls and we're going to have the responses. The numbers to call are 466-0989-762 and 662. Call us and pose your questions. Again, let me use this opportunity right now to say thank you so much for your participation. We have another caller on the line. Caller, good afternoon. You are live on Inside the News.
And good afternoon to your esteemed panelists. Now, you will notice in our population, we have a new ethnic mix about language. So how has the education system been accommodating, say, the Spanish-speaking children? Some of them come from Santo Domingo, wherever. I mean, some are born here, so they have easy adaptation. What are we doing? And I noticed a number of the Chinese children go to the convent school. In terms of, so address that issue in terms of equity. They have access, but do they have equity? All right.
Thank you. We're going to stop there with the calls and we're going to allow the responses. If I may, allow me to just repeat the questions. The first caller wanted some clarification on a comment he said was made by Mr. Tuckett with regards to St. Kitts and Nevis not being a developing country. So perhaps, Mr. Tuckett, you can provide some clarification on that. And the caller also spoke about panelists providing more of a historical background, where we came from to where we are now. The other question was, and I guess this would be a question specifically for the Minister of Education, but of course, each person can chime in on this. Do you feel now that the students are more independent learners now that they are home using the online platform? And the other caller wanted to know about the status of the STEP teachers who are assigned to the private schools. Then the last caller wanted to know about how has education been, or how have we been able to accommodate students who speak Spanish or Chinese or any other foreign language? Perhaps the Minister of Education could tackle that last question. But Mr. Tuckett, you can go ahead and tackle the first question with regards to clarifying that comment about St. Kitts and Nevis not being a developing country.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this statement is based on the fact that we are no longer able to access serious grants funding from international organizations based on our GDP and our income index, development index, and our income earning index. So this is a fact. This is known throughout. We've been having this said and even boasted by some political parties prior that this was a major achievement. It is an achievement, yes, to be considered no longer a developing country in certain targets that we would have tried to achieve in terms of our development and our nation building. But still, we have to go further and try our best to encourage our young people to help us as policymakers or as governments to diversify economy by helping them to achieve their highest potential, and that is through various other sectors other than the basic traditional tourism, agriculture, or just the public sector or public service. I would just like to also say that those of us who are achievers of higher learning, we need to do much more to help in our nation building as well. I think there needs to be more research done nationally, need more green papers and white papers to be submitted to the Parliament to address certain issues in the respective areas of discipline so that we can truly say that our people have benefited and our nation has benefited from the resources and opportunities made for higher tertiary education. I hope I've...
Thank you, Mr. Powell. We're going to move on. I'm going to jump to the question of the status of STEP teachers assigned to private schools. Perhaps the Ministers of Education can provide some clarity on this?
Yes, and if you don't mind, I'll just use the opportunity to respond to, I think, 2 other questions that might have been targeted at me.
Sure.
Step workers at private schools continue to be paid by through STEP and by the government. So there's no additional burden that is being placed on the establishment at which they're working. I hope that provides some clarity. In relation to, and I suspect that the caller, in using the reference ethnic, was responding to an increasing Latino community, and that is also in our schools in terms of Spanish speaking. And we have recognized that some of these students, well, some of them are born here and it's not as bad. Some are not, or some come from households where there's only Spanish being spoken, and so there is somewhat of a language divide. And while there have been some programs in different schools that have been implemented specific to those schools and students there, I am currently in communication with a local educator who is trained in language skills, who is developing a program, a more strategic program that we can utilize to really assist those Spanish-speaking students in terms of getting them on the same level with other students. And then there was a question, I think, about in relation to
students being independent.
Independent in terms of their learning as a result. From an administrative standpoint, I think it might be a bit early to really assess that. Bearing in mind that we have had the advantage of in-person school for the whole academic year. And so the reliance and usage of those online modalities would have been limited. But I'm interested to hear what Senator Clark may respond, how she may respond to this. As a teacher, she may be a bit more in tune with specific instances. So I would yield to her in that respect.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Before we continue, Mr. Liebert, can we get your take from the Nevis side with regards to how the education system has responded to students who have a different language, and if you feel that students are now more independent in their learning?
I'll start with the last one first about students being more independent with their learning, and I'll tend to stick close to the answer that was just given by Minister Powell, because really and truly it's sort of too soon to tell. Somebody who's probably in the classroom with the students could probably pick something up based on their own students, but in terms of something being done systematically, we would have to go and look at the empirical evidence over time, and we simply have not been in a position to do that. We simply have not been afforded enough time to do that, actually. Most of our students here in the Federation have been in school, in classes, in our high schools. I know here on Nevis, our public high schools, we've been implementing a shift system, which means that some of our students, they would do either afternoon classes or morning classes on the platform, but still it's a bit too early to tell because that information probably has not trickled back up the chain in a way that it could be used to do that type of analysis. In terms of students coming in who, from a different language group, be that Spanish, French, I know we have a large enough contingent of persons from the Dominican Republic here, and they have been integrating in our schools year by year. So we get persons living in the Federation would sometimes bring their young kids or young family members, and we have had to integrate them into the system, and they probably would not have English as a first language, or they would not have any English at all in some cases. And I know on Nevis, we have 1 or 2 private practitioners who offer private lessons, classes in teaching English to some of those students. In these cases, the parents would have to pay because the classes are not free. But it is one of those challenges that we have as a federation. Certainly, if we're going to have persons coming in and they're going to be from, a different language, then it's one of the challenges that we have. We have to find ways to integrate them in, and we have to create probably a course or something that would really cater for them. So it's something that we have to look at. As we said, our system is not a perfect one. It's something that we continue to work at day by day.
Thank you, Mr. Library. Thank you so much for that response. Now we're at 11:41, so we're very much out of time, but I'm going to allow responses from Dr. Clark and Ms. Keynes, and allow me to just pose these questions again. Can I get your take on students now being, or do you think students are now independent learners? I know both of you are teachers and or educators, and then with regards to how have you been able to cater to students who may come with a different language? Ms. Clark, Dr. Clark, you may go ahead first.
All right, thank you, Devon. So I'll respond to those 2 questions, but I think it's important that I had to do some fact checking based on the statement by the minister in terms of his personal experience with economic cost. I did some fact checking, so maybe the minister would have to fact check again to confirm that he actually may have received economic costs from the Labour administration, perhaps not for his first year, but there was also, okay, well, fine. And well, the records might be showing differently, but anyways, move on to something more substantial. The fact that the Keon High School had a very successful case of a student from Santo Domingo who actually migrated here, and we actually had a tutor, a teacher assigned to, there were siblings assigned to them to translate for all of their classes, and that student eventually graduated with over 9 subject passes and moved on to CFBC. Of course, the challenge is when you get to CFBC, you may not easily access the REACH program or the SAFE program because you are not of Kittitian descent, but that child has been very successful and actually moved on to be one of the remarkable teams some years back. In terms of that very pertinent question of whether or not students are now independent learners, and as a teacher, I'm telling you, we're not there yet. Students are more responsible because they recognize that they now have to log in and get into the classrooms. But if you do a rapid assessment of any teacher from any school, the cry is students aren't getting online. Students, whether they can't log into MS Teams, whether they don't have the devices, parents leave their students here expecting them to log on. They don't show up for the classes. They don't complete the assignments. And so it really suggests to us that it requires parents, teachers, and the administration of education to move to that point where students actually take up the responsibility. No, unless we collect this empirical data, we will never know whether it's a year from now. It's been a year, we don't know, and it's sufficient time to assess this. But in 5 years, if at the administrative level, if the MOE does not determine that this is something important to address and to collect data on, we will still have the same response 5 years from now. It's too early, or we don't know, we can't look at the evidence. It's time to assess, because it's been a year and we found ourselves in a very similar position to where we were last year, pulling our pants up when we really had sufficient time to get everybody ready for online learning, recognizing that what happened in St. Kitts with us being able to complete an academic year, unfortunately, Minister, you said it wasn't by chance. We just were lucky that we were managing the COVID-19 situation well in St. Kitts. So it really wasn't by chance. And it's a matter of good management and luck. But guess what? We had 1 year of doing this successfully, and now we're still here with students struggling to access their online learning. So there's much more that we can do with what's being proposed as the all of society or approach to getting everybody online and getting all students ready. So there's much more that we can do. We're doing some things, but there's much more that we can do.
Thank you, Dr. Clark, for your response. We're out of time, so I'm now going to allow Ms. Keynes to give her response to those questions with regards to students now being independent learners, and how have you been able to cater to students who have a different language?
Okay, so as it relates to, yes, I think the speakers before me touched on these topics quite well. I agree with the ministers as well as Dr. Clark, Senator Clark, that it's a bit too soon to determine whether or not our children have become independent learners, because in some instances, some parents would say, yes, my child has become a more independent learner, but then there are others who would say no. So we can't assess that yet. But I will join with Dr. Clark in saying that we should make a deliberate attempt, a deliberate effort to really assess it. Don't just and do it in a structured way. Don't just wait and kind of wing it. Let's really assess it, because it could mean some good things or some bad things for us in the future. As it relates to the education system accommodating children who speak a different language, the ministers would have spoken on this, and I think that they would have touched on it quite well. I too know of persons on the island on the island of Nevis, who offer classes in foreign languages, and so they offer English to persons who do not speak English as a first language, and they offer Spanish, French, etc. to persons who wish to learn such. So I think they would have touched on those quite well. So I'll just leave it there and get ready for the closing remarks by all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Keynes. As I said, we're really out of time, so I'm going to allow each person just 30 seconds to give their closing comments at this time. I'm going to begin with Mr. Tuckett.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. Just wanted to say that in regards to us as a federation achieving great success in managing the COVID, I don't believe it has to do with luck. It's either one of two things that we have in our society. It's either a blessing from God or the use of our education. And I would like to say it is not just one of the either, but it's both. Also like to say that this opportunity for us to learn new languages. So we need to consider our students benefiting from the cultural exchange with our brothers and sisters who are from the Santo Domingo or Dominican Republic, who have generic or genetic links to St. Kitts. And of course, I do believe there's an opportunity for us to truly explore the avenues of exploratory learning. This is what we need to do, and have continuous learning as a hallmark for our children and for our nation. And thank you very much for having me. I look forward for more panel discussions like this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tuckett. We're going to now have the Honorable Troy Libert of the CCM and Minister of Education for Nevis to give his closing remarks. Just 30 seconds, Mr. Libert.
Devon, I want to thank you for the invitation, and of course the management of WinFM for the invitation. I want to thank all of the other members of the panel. It was a wonderful discussion on education. Education, as we know, is very, very important, for any country, and certainly we value education here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I think most of us here would have gotten our education or our start in education right here in the Federation. And the system here in the Federation is a big part of who we are. Certainly, I speak for myself, I value those persons who would have been my teachers, those who would have been my mentors, and so on. And we have to ensure that that same level of education or a better level of education is there for our kids now and would be there for those who come in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liebert. We're going to have Dr. Clark give her closing remarks. Thus, just 30 seconds, Dr. Clark.
Right. Thank you so much, Devon. This was an excellent opportunity to speak about the importance of education. I believe that we have so far to go because that's the only way we're going to be number one in the region. We have to prioritize, we have to invest, and at the national level, we have to budget even more for education. Now I'm going to take up the minister's offer and forward a list of students, both ministers of students from Nevis and St. Kitts who have been struggling to access support to finalize their degree, support to access economic cost, and recognize that both ministers are saying that it's important and that the politicization of education is something that's untenable and something that we all recognize has to end at some point. So I'm really happy that this forum has allowed these ministers to really show that they are for all-inclusive, equal access to education. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. We are going to continue. Ms. Keynes.
Hi, yes, Devon, thank you so much. And I too join the panelists rather, in saying thank you to WinFM, thank you to you, Devon, for having me here this afternoon, well, this morning and this afternoon, to weigh in on this topic. And I hope to see much more of this happening in the future, where you can have representatives of varying political organizations coming together to discuss issues that are pertinent to our island, our country rather, St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as our people. As we discuss access to education, I just want to remind, I can't leave without saying that up to a few years back, Division students couldn't attend school if they were pregnant or if they had a child. Up to a few years back, Division students couldn't attend school if they had locks, despite that happening on the island of St. Kitts. I bring up those because I want to say that we have come a long way, but we didn't come here overnight and we didn't come here calmly. As a matter of fact, people had to stand up and speak out against these things. And yes, we don't want for there to be chaos in our society, but we really need for our people to understand that it's a St. Kitts and Nevis for all of us. And so if there's an issue that you see that is discriminatory or an issue that you think is negatively impacting our people, impacting our children and their ability to learn, we should speak up and we should try to engage, if possible, the representatives within the Department and Ministry of Education to see some positive results, and that engagement should be welcomed. I want to say that I think that the Ministry and Departments of Education on both islands have really been trying. Of course, it's not perfect. There are a lot of things that can be done, but I generally see that effort has been made. And I just want us as parents, us as regular persons in society, us as teachers to work together to bring about positive change in the area of education. I mean, teachers have, ministry has a role to play, Ministry and Department of Education has a role to play in setting the policy. Teachers have a role to play in terms of actually teaching and being creative. Parents have a role to play in terms of following up and being hands-on with your teachers, and children have a role to play in terms of going to school, whether it be virtually or in person, and actually learning. So we all have roles to play. Let us play our parts. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Keynes. Mr. Powell?
Thank you, Devon. Thank you for the opportunity to really be a part of this panel. I think if it's one topic that the reps from all of the political parties can sort of agree should be prioritized and needs that support its education. And so certainly as a Minister of Education, I continue to do all within my power with the support of the wider government to ensure that as many children within St. Kitts and Nevis have that equal access and equity of access to a good education. The children are our future, and we just have to support them. Thank you, and a reminder to everybody, be safe. We're under 2 weeks of restricted movement. Let us stay at home and protect each other.
Thank you so much, Mr. Powell. Again, I want to use this opportunity on behalf of all of us here at WinFM to say a heartfelt thank you for accepting our invitation to sit on this panel discussion, which I would say was a very good discussion, very informative, very fruitful, and all of the presenters were really, really, really good. With the topic, is access to education equal? And the subtopic, advantages from changes in education due to COVID-19. You were listening to Inside the News on WinFM 98.9. We are just before 2 o'clock, so a very late finish as we are accustomed to wrapping up at 1:30, but nevertheless, I think such a conversation needed or demanded more time. Thank you so much, and until next time, I am Devon Cornelius. Remember, stay safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, and play your part in keeping St. Kitts and Nevis safe from the coronavirus disease. Have a good one, everyone.
If you need protection, you need one who you can trust to secure